Good Wednesday afternoon to you. Hope you're having a great day. Thanks for joining LE. Bye week for the Browns coaching staff out in Berea working, trying to get everything just right with that offense to get going in the final 5 games of the regular season. Tom Withers, Associated Press reporter, will be along a little later to talk Browns, and that is where we begin. As I mentioned, Browns on the bye week, 6-6. Still alive for the AFC North, still alive in the AFC wild card race, but needing to get some consistency and some wins rolling here in the final 5 games. General Manager Andrew Berry met with the media today, and he talked about where the Browns sit, kind of a state of the Browns.
Enter the bye week at 6-6. Obviously that doesn't reflect, the aspirations that we had at this point in the season. That being said, I think the bye comes at a really good time for us. I know Kevin, the offensive staff, defensive staff, special teams group, they're all hard at work, really reviewing everything from the season, whether that's scheme, personnel usage, in a manner that, would allow us to make any necessary adjustments that allows us to play our best football, over the final 5 weeks of the regular season. So that all being said, taking a step back, really a little bit from a big picture perspective, I think the next 5 games, they, really provide us with a really valuable opportunity. The reality of it is, entering the season and entering December, you hope for the opportunity to play meaningful football, late in the year. And that's something that's still right in front of us. We're going to play 5 teams that I think are playoff caliber, 4 in the AFC, 3 in our division. And I'm excited about that opportunity. I'm excited to learn about, how our team deals with adversity, the resolve. And that's something that we're looking forward to seeing, how our group responds out of the bye.
Let's welcome in Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer and cleveland.com. And Tim, it is true the Browns will be playing meaningful football in December, but they're going to need to win each week to keep it meaningful football pretty much.
Yeah, and with the way the AFC is right now, there's no guarantee that even winning out is going to get them a playoff spot. It's just so congested in this conference when it comes to just the depth, the amount of good teams that are battling for playoff spots. I mean, the Browns could easily go 11-6 and miss out because, they've missed out on some tiebreakers with teams like the Patriots, the Chargers, the Chiefs, for example. All those potential tiebreaker opportunities, those are games particularly the Chiefs and Chargers in particular, those are games where they could have won and didn't. And if the Browns had been able to go into Baltimore and win, all of a sudden we're talking about 7-5 in the bye. It would be a different feeling. You're not out of the division race just yet. You're right there going in the bye with a chance to reset and regroup for this 5-game stretch. But as has kind of been typical with the season, it's been a rough go. And with this schedule coming up the last 5 weeks, it does not get any easier. And if they somehow go 5-0, they will absolutely earn it against this final gauntlet.
Yeah, I would agree. And you make a very valid point. It seems like every loss we're looking back and saying, man, if they would have won that, and you said it after the Steelers game, one that was close and got away similar to the Ravens. The offense has been a problem. Last 7 weeks, the Browns have scored more than 17 points just once. That was that Cincinnati game. And then this is even more concerning. In those 7 games, they have scored a total of 7 points in the fourth quarter. So I guess the question becomes, can this offense be fixed in a bye week?
I don't mean to be pessimistic, but I think the answer is no. And the way I look at the problems on the offense, I don't think they can be fixed in a week. They're only going to get fixed, when the season's over. And the big things I'm talking about are health in particular, number one. When you look at the tackles, Jedrick Wills has not been 100%. He's played only one half of healthy football. I know he's, recovered from the sprained ankle. He's looking he's been a lot better, but he really struggled and he was battling through that. There may be some effects with that. Jack Conklin, obviously, he's done for the season. And Baker Mayfield in particular, I mean, right now, I know he's gutting through a lot, but he's got 6 injuries right now, including a shoulder that I don't know if it's going to get healed until he has surgery. That takes him out for a couple months. And with that operation in the passing game not being 100% health, I mean, it's easy to see why it's struggling. And that kind of parlays into my number 2 thing, which is receiver talent. And we know Mayfield, when he's good, can make receivers better, he can be very accurate. But when he's struggling like he is right now, when he's laboring like he is right now, he needs receivers to help him out. And right now, as we saw, particularly against Baltimore, they're just not getting separation. They just don't have a guy who can consistently beat a one-on-one guy. And we've seen that throughout the season. It's just been a theme of this offense. Guys just aren't winning their matchups at receiver. And I think it points to there's just not enough talent at that position. I know there are some people that are going to say, well, a quarterback's supposed to elevate the talent, but even with the best quarterbacks, they've still got help at the receiver position. I mean, you look at what Russell Wilson's got to work with, Patrick Mahomes, even Lamar Jackson to an extent, Joe Burrow. They don't even have to look further than their own division, the Browns do, to see just the impact of having at least one dynamic receiver. And right now, they just don't have that. And those things, I don't think, can be fixed until the offseason.
Yeah, and to your point, Jarvis Landry has not been healthy, battling through an MCL in your knee. You just don't have the explosion or the speed that you normally would. Anthony Schwartz, who they tried to get in, for his speed, has been in concussion protocol for a while, so they're hoping to get him back. Andrew Berry talked about kind of what the Browns need to do to get that offense back in track during this bye week.
We all think the offense can play at a higher level. I think, like I mentioned, Jake, I think the biggest thing is really just the consistency in the passing game, which is a number of things. And again, I know our staff is hard at work, finding the right solutions that will allow us to play at the highest level, going into the last 5 weeks of the season. But again, every year is unique. You're not entitled to, top level performance just because we return the same guys. You really do have to work at it every year, and on a week-to-week basis. And this upcoming bye week, or this current bye week, I should say, will play a big role in that in terms of getting us back on track where we need to be.
So Andrew Berry also kind of referencing that the Browns had a number of players back on the offense, pretty much everybody back on the offensive side of the ball, and big things were expected. Is this, last week coming out of the bye, Kevin Stefanski made a couple of tweaks, got comfortable, and the offense took off. Are you saying you don't think that's going to repeat itself here in 2021, Tim?
If it's going to happen, it's going to be, there's going to have to be a lot of smoke and mirrors, I think, to get that done. And one thing that stood out to me in particular when I was watching the Baltimore game, I even tweeted about it. Where were the screen passes? That's the thing we saw a lot of from this offense in the beginning of the season. Screens to Kareem Hunt, screens even to Nick Chubb. And on Sunday night, I don't remember one single screen pass. And against an aggressive defense like Baltimore has, you feel like that would be, option number one, and to kind of deal with that is get the ball behind the defense, screen them, get them out of position, get them to change, the tempo with which they attack downhill and those sorts of things. But we didn't see that. So that would be something to reincorporate, maybe even some bubble screen, get the ball quickly out to Jarvis Landry or Donovan Peoples-Jones, or when he's healthy, Anthony Schwartz, get the ball of them really quick, just get the ball in their hands, get them in 2-on-2 situations. So we saw the Ravens do that and have some success. Granted, they have more explosion at the receiver position right now than the Browns do. I know people were talking about running the football being a thing, but if they're going to do that, also, they have to be less predictable. I feel like they were very predictable when it came to run the ball against the Ravens, and that's something that they need to work on. So there are ways to improve the efficiency. Obviously, giving Baker a week to rest is going to help. I expect him to be better this coming Sunday when the Browns actually get another shot at the Ravens at home. But I think there's just limitations on personnel at the receiver position that are going to make it very hard to do what they want to do if teams like the Ravens don't respect the Browns passing game, which, it was fair to say that was the right decision with their defensive game plan last week.
Yeah, and let's come back to that in a minute, but you mentioned, the wide receiver dilemma that the Browns have, not getting separation. So Andrew Berry talked about the usage and the performance of those wide receivers as well today.
Yeah, I think it's probably safe, like all of our position groups. It's been, we've been inconsistent. We've had games where, we've played well, and we have games where we haven't played quite as well. And that goal of consistency is really kind of the biggest thing leading into the end of the year. I am looking forward to hopefully having that group being at full health, or at least close to full health, after the bye, and I think that'll certainly help. But look, big opportunity in front of us, and those guys are going to have to play or continue to play major roles. Look, we are still searching for consistency in all areas, and that's ultimately what we have to find to reach our goals.
So, Tim, one of the things that popped into my mind when we were talking, and I told you to hold that thought, the Ravens overloaded the side that the Browns were the strong side of the formation a lot. So the Browns were running into 7 defenders with only 4, sometimes 5 people to block. My thought is if you put Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb in the backfield together, you can potentially make it so, okay, if you want to overload one side, we run the fullback to the weak side of the formation, and we make you pay. So in other words, in my thought, you could potentially work against that overloading a defensive side of the line by putting both Hunt and Chubb in the backfield together. What do you think about that? I know it's a little out of the box, but your thoughts?
Well, I like it. I mean, we've talked about this for a few years, like why Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb can't really be on the field together. And you feel like that would make a lot of sense because they're both talented running backs. As a defense, you don't know who's going to get the football. You don't know if it's going to be a run for Kareem, a run for Nick, or even a play action to one of those guys. I'd almost lean into that further. I was kind of going back to my smoke and mirrors thing, kind of go into a full house backfield where you put Dearness Johnson into the game. Then all of a sudden you're kind of running a very interesting package where you have 3 running backs who can all do different things. You're creating all sorts of options. And I think those are the things you can do to kind of mask deficiencies at the receiver position. And I mean, we can all look at this group and Andrew Rare is right, kind of saying the underperformed Jarvis Landry because he's been banged up. Donovan Peoples-Jones, I don't know how ready he is for a number 1 role. And Anthony Schwartz, I always kind of thought this year was going to kind of be more of a gimmick year where he's kind of has to do simple things until he kind of learns the offense. But I think this is going to really be a test of Kevin Stefanski's creativity and a willingness to stick to what works. And what works right now is he's got 3 good running backs at his disposal. He's got 5 games left. Might as well use them as much as he can, especially because this is as healthy as this group has been all season.
Yeah, I would agree. Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com, and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. On the other side of the break, we head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason, one about Myles Garrett and Case Keenum coming up, plus the highest graded Browns by Pro Football Focus through the first 12 weeks of the season. That's straight ahead on Sports4CLE. Stay with us.
Welcome back. Back to new friends, new classroom, and learning new things. Back to wearing shoes, man, like real shoes. Back to rushing to class. Back to having questions, lots of questions. Back to vending machine dinners. Back to too much caffeine, too late at night, but feeling like it was a night well spent. Back to pursuing your dreams and taking control of your future. Come back to go forward. Try C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns football. You see the number if you want to leave us a voicemail on the voicemail of Truth and Reason. This voicemail of Truth and Reason about Myles Garrett, his interaction with Lamar Jackson, as well as Case Keenum.
So I just want to know your thoughts on what you thought about Myles Garrett shaking Lamar Jackson's hand after that crazy touchdown pass. Did you think it was okay or not? And also, what are the chances of us seeing Case? We're paying him a good amount of money to be the backup quarterback, so I'm not sure why we haven't seen him play. All right, thanks, guys. Bye.
All right, very good points. And Tim, I had no issue at all with Myles Garrett shaking Lamar Jackson's hand. He tried to basically grab him by the arm, the shoulder, the leg, tried to rip him down, throw him down, toss him down, and somehow Lamar Jackson was athletic enough to get off a pass that Myles Garrett hit his hand when he threw it, and it still ended up as a 30-some yard touchdown pass. I had no issues with him shaking Lamar Jackson's hand after that whatsoever.
I'm with you. That was a play straight out of a video game, and I mean that's just what Lamar Jackson does. Even though the Browns picked him off 4 times, he still has the ability to just pull a Houdini and do something crazy like that. So I had no problem with it either, because I mean, as a defender, in Myles Garrett situation, you're like, what else do I have to do? I'm running him down 20 yards back. I'm harassing him. I get a hand to his hand, hit the ball, and it's still a touchdown. At some point, you just tip your cap and just move on to the next play. And that's just the way it works in professional sports sometimes. Sometimes, no matter how good you are, the other guy just beats you.
Yeah, and it's not like Myles Garrett didn't line up and try to, knock him down again. So, I had no issue with that. I kind of thought the same thing about Case Keenum. Going into the Lions game, not necessarily going into the Ravens game, going into the bye week or coming into the second Ravens game, but Case Keenum's a pretty good backup. I probably would have put him in against the Lions if you said, all right, you got to make a decision. And my thought process would have been, let's get through the Lions game, let's get a win, let's try to get Baker Mayfield healed up a little bit and see what happens. But the Browns chose to play Baker Mayfield. They got the win. Now, Baker Mayfield, you're riding with him the rest of the year.
Yeah, no question about it. And I know, the caller was talking about paying Case Keenum $6 million. I'm one of those people that feels like in the NFL nowadays, $6 million isn't a lot of money. I mean, the salary cap is over $180 million. So $6 million really is almost a drop in the bucket compared to that. But I mean, I'm with you there that I think, it would have been a good idea to at least consider Case Keenum against the Lions. Although if Keenum played and they were to lose that game, all of a sudden you're opening up a whole new can of worms.
Yep.
But I think it seems like, just from my understanding and everything that, Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry have talked about, the fact that they think Baker Mayfield, even as banged up as he is, gives the Browns a better shot to win than Case Keenum, that to me speaks volumes, because Baker Mayfield, I think, physically has arm limitations that doesn't have the same arm limitations that Case Keenum has. And we saw those against the Broncos, where he really could not get a deep ball. And Baker Mayfield, even though that deep ball has been inaccurate this season for whatever reason, he still has that ability.
Yeah, and that has to be the thought process. If we put Case Keenum in and lose, we're going to regret it, until we get back on the field. So I get the thought process as well. But certainly I would have considered playing Case Keenum against the Lions. All right, highest graded Browns through 12 weeks via Pro Football Focus Analytics website. Not a surprise, Myles Garrett, the top-rated one, along with Joel Bitonio, who has played really well. Wyatt Teller comes in third. The rookie, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, fourth, and Denzel Ward, fifth. All those guys playing at an extremely high level. One thing that jumps out to me, no skill position guys crack this list, and it's mostly and then, the rookie linebacker. So again, it kind of feeds into why there have been some issues on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, and I mean, when you look at those top 5 also, it's BI tests. I mean, we all see that those are probably the 5 best players on the field, and it's no surprise that, Pro Football Focus really agrees with that. And like you said, really nothing that contributes to the passing game is in that top 5. I mean, your only 2 offensive players in that top 5 are obviously, we know Joel Bitonio and Wyatt Teller and the work they do in the run game. That's a big reason why they've been so successful at running the ball outside of Sunday night in Baltimore. But yeah, they just haven't had the production out of the key elements of the passing game by and large, I think, because those guys, the main operation of the passing game just hasn't been there for even a half. I mean, at any point this season, it's been part of the reason why they struggled is like, they're not 100%. They're not close to 100%. And it reflects just in the level of play where they've been, because obviously if you're injured, you're not going to play the same way you were if you're not unencumbered. If you're, feeling good, it's obviously going to be a different level of play.
And what we're talking about with tackles being banged up, that forces Baker Mayfield to have to move in the pocket, which again kind of throws everything a little off kilter. And with his, his injured non-throwing shoulder, that still affects his throwing when he has to move and throw kind of off-platform, unscheduled, if you will. Let's shift the focus just a little bit. What did you think of the defensive performance against the Ravens, particularly the way Joe Woods approached the Ravens?
I thought it was a very good performance by the defense, probably the best of the season, given the opponent. And Lamar Jackson basically admitted himself he played like a rookie. And I think the way the Browns played had a lot to do with it. They took some pages out of what the Dolphins were doing. They were kind of muddying up the picture a little bit, made things very difficult for him. I mean, 4 interceptions says a lot about just the performance they had. They had Lamar kind of running, scrambling like crazy, which is obviously what he can do so well. But the thing that stood out to me was, just the improvements they made really showed out in the speed that Lamar only really broke one big run in the game. And that was kind of in the fourth quarter when the Ravens were trying to run the clock out. You could see just the speed of guys like John Johnson, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, Grant Delpit really making a difference and really making it harder for Lamar Jackson to really do the things he wants to do. So I'm curious how he and Baltimore are going to adjust the next time they meet. It should be interesting. I don't think they're going to get 4 interceptions again, but I think there's things the Browns can do in the rematch that they did in Baltimore to have some success and try and do some of those same things again, while at the same time maybe mixing a few more things up.
Yeah, and even that touchdown pass, you had Garrett after him, you had Clowney after him. Lamar Jackson's the only guy.
He's been surprisingly durable throughout his NFL career. And I mean, again, that play was kind of a video game play. There's no semblance of structure when he's running 20 yards behind the line of scrimmage. It was just kind of a play between outstanding players, Lamar Jackson, of course, and then Mark Andrews to find some space to get Lamar the football. I mean, again, you win in pro football with players. Woody Hayes always said you win with people, and it's no different in pro football.
Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer and cleveland.com and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. On the other side of the break, we will listen in, mic'd up as Baker Mayfield and Myles Garrett talk to Lamar Jackson after the game. We'll also head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports4CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. We continue talking Browns on the bye, 6-6. They will get the Baltimore Ravens again after the bye, a week from Sunday. Inside the NFL on Paramount Plus gives us this listen in. Garrett mic'd up after the game talking to Lamar Jackson.
Hey, what's up? Baller, bro. Keep on. How you doing? You good? I'm good. Yeah. All right, man. I gotta holler at you. We gotta right off season now. This time. I know. How's your mama doing? She good, bro. Yes, sir. How your brother doing? You good? You good? Standing there. All right. Yeah, we gonna get right. You good? Oh my God. Yes, sir, man. Hey, good. Buddy. Hey, why you had to do a little tombstone on me for Halloween?
Now, why everybody talk about it? I like to have a little fun. Yeah. You can do a tombstone. A lot of people be faking, bro. Don't start that.
Hey, bro, good plan against. We're gonna see you in 2 weeks, baby.
Yes, sir.
And Tim Bielik, everybody wants to talk about the tombstone.
And he did get a sack, so I mean, I guess he can put it out there, that quarterback graveyard. So,
yeah, and legitimately, he still has a chance to get the NFL sack record. He's at 14, so he's tied Reggie Camp for the Browns franchise record. That NFL sack record is still within reach.
Yeah, no question about it. I mean, in a Browns season where you've seen a lot of players on offense and even some on defense really struggle to find consistency, Myles Garrett has been the one constant this season. He looks like the player the Browns drafted him to be when they took him number 1 overall back in 2017. He's looking like that guy. He's healthy, which is tremendous for the Browns. And I think it seems like now he's put it all together. He's got all the moves. I mean, he was dominant on Sunday night against the Ravens. He did really everything in his help the defense do what it needed to do to try and get off the field, to get those 4 turnovers, slow Lamar Jackson down, and really give the offense a chance to win. So, I mean, his growth this season it's been one of the few bright spots this season, and it's been fun to watch, and we'll see how high he goes up that single season sack leaderboard.
Yeah, and it will be interesting, the final 5 games. All right, so this is interesting. Browns have been beat up by injuries. Ravens have been beat up as well. I believe it's 6 of their guys that were projected starters have been injured and out for the year. Why is it that the Ravens haven't been as adversely affected by injuries as the Browns, do you think?
Well, you look at the guys who are hurt for Baltimore, and obviously those are some big names. Marcus Peters is out for the season. J.K. Dobbins out for the season. Ronnie Stanley also been out for the season. But you know who's not on that list? Lamar Jackson. And the fact that Lamar Jackson is healthy, and I mean, I know he's had the illness. I know he tested positive for COVID earlier in the year, but I mean, the guy's healthy. And when your most dynamic player, who, by the way, plays in the most important position on the football field, when he's healthy and when he's ready to go, and when he's the caliber he is, you can overcome a lot of those different things. You can overcome, your offensive line not being 100%. You can overcome not having, your top 3 running backs. You're basically using straight free agents at running back to, salvage something. But Lamar is there, and that's what I think the difference is. And I mean, when healthy, I still think he is better than Baker, but you see the difference with the Browns is that with all the injuries, Baker has been injured. I mean, he's got 6 different injuries he's dealing with right now, and he's clearly not at 100%. And when the guy who, like I said, is the most important player in the operation of the offense, when he's not 100%, when he's struggling, when he's having a hard time moving or, executing his proper fundamentals when throwing the football, it's going to affect everything. It's going to affect the passing game. It's going to affect protection. It's going to affect play calling. It affects everything. Baltimore hasn't had to worry about that. I mean, they've had a massive amount of injuries. It shows on defense, but number 8's healthy, and that's what really matters. And that's why Baltimore is still leading the AFC North.
Yep, and number 8 has led a number of fourth quarter comebacks for the Ravens as well. All right, let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason again. This one about Baker Mayfield.
I can't figure this out. For some strange reason, and people are talking about needing to rest Baker Mayfield. They continue to play a clearly injured quarterback here. I mean, look at the tape. His throws are not what they were before he stupidly decided to hurl himself into the path of a safety who picked him off in week 2. This is not an issue of rest. What he needs is surgery, perhaps more than one, to fix him up for next spring. The sooner that gets done, the better. The longer it's postponed, the less chance we're going to see a genuine quarterback competition next spring. And that's what needs to happen here. Something here just doesn't make sense.
And I hope the takeaway from this is don't try to tackle a guy who is running downfield with an interception. If you're the quarterback, stay healthy, stay in one piece. Don't hurt any part of your shoulder. But I agree. I don't think he's been the same. And I think anybody that watches close enough could not argue that point.
No question about it. And I think I've kind of been the proponent that it's not just the physical pain of the injuries that's affecting him. I think there's a mental side to it too, because it's human nature to think about those injuries. And every time he's dropping back to think, okay, I got to make sure to get the ball out or do whatever because my knee's hurting or I'm having pain in my shoulder. I can only rotate a certain way. How is that going to affect the throw? And then when you're thinking about those things, you're trying to deal with the pain threshold. Naturally, it's going to affect your thought process. So maybe it's affecting him mentally as well. We saw the frustration against the Lions. I'm sure there's a lot of that's gone into it. Physically, he's obviously not the same because, I mean, like I said earlier, you can only do so much when you're physically limited due to injuries. And I'm sure there is a mental part of it too, because like I said, when there's pain going on in the mind, it can sometimes affect the thought process. Sometimes it either speeds up your clock or you're not able to see what's in front of you because maybe you're not thinking about that. Maybe he takes a step in his drop or moves his shoulder and then he feels a twinge or something like that. There's a lot of things that could be involved in the process. But I mean, the bottom line, he's got 6 injuries. One that's definitely probably not going to heal without surgery. I've been the proponent that if you shut him down, you got to shut him down to give him the surgery. It seems like the Browns won't do that based on, all the things that Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski are saying, at least until they're out of the playoff picture. I get why you wouldn't do that while you're still mathematically in it, because you never know. Mayfield could suddenly be healthy. He could suddenly look like the Mayfield we saw against the Chiefs in week 1, to an extent what we saw against the Chargers in week 5, and then lead this magic run. That's why that's why I think from their perspective, they're not shutting him down, because he's still capable of those things. But I mean, he's far from 100%, and it's clear that way. And it's not a referendum on him. It's just been a bad luck year for him and this entire football team when it comes to injuries.
Yeah. Andrew Berry talked about Baker Mayfield's play and kind of looking at it moving forward.
That Baker's incredibly physically tough. I think he's told you guys, at moments of the year where he's been frustrated with this, with his own performance. That being said, he has had stretches, this year where, he has played well for us. And look, the reality is, like, he's worked through injuries no different than, other players on our roster. But I know, he expects of himself, and we expect, him, whenever he's on the field, to perform at a capable level, at a winning level. And we expect him to play his best football down the stretch here after the bye.
Let's hope the bye rest gives him a little bit of life. The other thing that I think is important to note in response to what Andrew Berry said, the difference is, and you pointed it out, Tim, the quarterback touches the ball on every single snap. So the ball's in his hands every snap. That's a little different than if you're a running back or a guy who can potentially, I don't want to say take a play off, but you're not as intensely involved in the play every snap like the quarterback is.
Absolutely. And something that stood out in my mind from watching the Sunday night broadcast was Chris Collinsworth talking about how Baker Mayfield kind of has a violent throwing motion. And in some way, being an undersized quarterback at 6'1", you're not going to have, the same natural physical tools that a guy who's 6'6" is going to have, where he could just loft the football 40 yards down the field. It's basically a situation where you just kind of have to use your whole body. And when you're banged up, especially in that left shoulder, when you got to create a platform to throw, you're naturally not going to be your normal self. And that's, I think, what we're seeing out of Baker is he has to make physical adjustments because of the pain he's in, because of the injuries he's in, and it's affecting him. There's a saying I always find fascinating in sports is a difference between pain and injury. I mean, everybody's in pain this time of year. There's no question about it. But but when guys are actually injured, when something's wrong with their bodies that they can't necessarily recover from and they're on their own time, it's going to affect them. And Baker probably is going to be dealing with that more so than quarterbacks who are bigger than him, who have that different way of throwing than Baker. It's just an unfortunate injury that kind of happened to him. And you can just see how it's affected him in so many ways and kind of robbed him from being the player that we've seen for the past few seasons.
Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer and cleveland.com and I are going to step aside, take one more time out. On the other side of the break, we will hear from Colin Cowherd. He's going to stop talking about Baker Mayfield if the fan voting says he should. We'll see how that turns out. Plus, can we really judge Baker Mayfield on this season? Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a line. A long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just a mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
Well, the self-proclaimed knower of everything about Baker Mayfield, Colin Cowherd, at it again. He kind of throws it out there if he should stop talking about Baker Mayfield. Here is Colin Cowherd.
You'll hear people say, Colin, why do you keep talking about Baker? So I thought, you know what? That's a good question. So I'm going to let you decide if I talk about him ever again. Because I don't find him that fascinating. There's just 10 other quarterbacks I'd rather talk about. He's beat up. He's 28-28. I won the argument. At 8:30 Pacific, 11:30 Eastern, for 30 minutes, I will put up a poll on my Twitter account, the show account, and my personal account. You tell me. You want me to stop talking about Baker? This will be the last time I ever talk about him. But here's the rub. If he goes on a 5-game winning streak, they get to the playoffs, he gets to the AFC Championship, the Super Bowl, I'm not talking about him. Can have it both ways. If you want me to stop, I'll stop. Your choice. I got a lot to talk about. Believe me, I don't need to talk about the Cleveland Browns.
And there is the results of the poll. He will not talk about Baker Mayfield. And I think that is a sigh of relief from Cleveland Browns fans. Almost 60% to stop talking about Baker Mayfield, to 40% that he should continue talking about Baker Mayfield. Let's see if he can. Let's see. We will be monitoring Mr. Coward to make sure he is man of his word and stops talking about Baker Mayfield, thankfully. Although it is somewhat amusing, and he does give us some content. So,
yeah, I mean, it's been just how Colin Cowherd's been ever since Baker sat down with him on the show all those years ago. It's been kind of a fun little back and forth rivalry. I don't buy that. I mean, what if Baker, again, is he going to really hold himself to it if Baker, comes out in 2022, he lights it up, he does live up to that number one potential? Is he really not going to talk about it if the Browns are somehow 14-3 next season? They're somehow in the Super Bowl and he's not going to talk about Baker Mayfield? Like, I get it. I get why he's doing that, why he's doing this poll, but do we really believe he's going to actually hold up to his end of the bargain and never talk about Baker again? I'm kind of skeptical just because we all know how this works.
Yeah, and, again, Colin Cowherd is where he is because he's entertaining. All right, so Andrew Berry was asked the question, does he need to see Baker Mayfield play next season to make a decision on if he is the long-term answer, the quote-unquote franchise quarterback, if you will? Here's Andrew Berry.
You really do try and take a wider lens, so to speak. But really, again, like our focus is on playing our best football in December and positioning ourselves to really play in the postseason this year because we have a ton of meaningful games. And that really significantly outsizes, any individual player decision across the roster, that we're gonna make. So there will be plenty of time to think through, how we're going to build the roster into next year. But at the end of the day, everybody's focus and energy, within the organization is making sure that, we do everything in our power to maximize the current season.
So, Tim, how much can the Browns really judge Baker Mayfield based on how beat up he is this year?
I don't think a lot. I mean, it's not even just his injury. I think it's the injuries, across the board and to the key elements of the passing game. And one thing that stood out to me when Jack Conklin was playing on Sunday, that first series, Baker looked like Baker. He looked comfortable. He looked confident. He was letting it rip. He was accurate. I think one of his only incompletions was a drop by Donovan Peoples-Jones. And then as soon as Conklin leaves the game, we've seen the Baker that we've seen for most of the season, inaccurate, indecisive, double clutching, not sure of himself. And I think, those elements play into it in addition to his injuries. And again, those are things that aren't going to heal themselves up until the offseason when he goes and has surgery. I just think with this whole passing game, this offensive operation, just this whole season in general, I feel like this has kind of been a Murphy's Law year for the Browns where anything that can go wrong pretty much has gone wrong. They've been injured. They have not been able to produce in clutch situations. Kevin Stefanski's calls just haven't worked. The schedule has been brutal, and this ending stretch, it doesn't let up. In fact, it gets even harder for the Browns in these final 5 games, especially with the bye being so late. It's hard to judge Mayfield on this stuff when there's so many things out there that have happened to him in this offense that have just turned this season on its head. And I think sometimes we make judgments on things. We try too hard to point to one thing when the reality is there's tens of or hundreds of things that go into play with this sort of thing. But so I think, going into 2022, as long as Mayfield and these key guys are healthy, that's when I think we do get the full final evaluation on whether or not he is a $35 to $40 million quarterback.
The other thing that I've said a couple of times is good general managers don't make a decision on key things like your quarterback until you have to. And the Browns really don't have to make it this year. They really don't have to make it next year. They could always franchise them. Again, that might not be something that, Baker Mayfield takes kindly to, but you have plenty of time to make sure you get this decision right. And this decision is big enough that you want to make sure you get it right. You have to. If Andrew Berry is certain one way or another, great. But he doesn't have to be for another year or two.
Yeah, and I think that's what we've seen out of Andrew Berry is he's not necessarily committing to a lot of things long term because the picture can change so many times. I mean, if you look at last season and Baker Mayfield signed an extension coming in this year, he performed poorly, everybody would be saying what a terrible contract that is. But I think in football, a lot of times you have outlier seasons. In any professional sport, you have outlier years where for whatever reason, it's just not clicking the right way. And I think for Baker, potentially this is an outlier year, and just for this team in general. And, you got to be flexible about these sort of things. And that's the buzzword I was thinking about with Andrew Berry is flexibility, not locking yourself into too many things all at one time, playing the long game, never really going all in until you absolutely have to. And I think that's what we're seeing with Baker right now is you've got 2 years to make, this decision. Take all the time you really need to do it, but don't rush yourself into a bad decision just because it's a position that you need.
Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer and cleveland.com. Tim, as always, thanks so much for the time and the insight. Appreciate it very much.
You got it. Thanks for having me, guys. Have a good day.
All right, Tim Bielik, make sure you read him. Pages of the Plain Dealer as well as cleveland.com. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. On the other side of the break, Tom Withers, reporter for the Associated Press, will join us. We'll continue to talk Browns. We'll talk Kevin Stefanski. Sports4CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Welcome back. Back to new friends, new classroom, and learning new things. Back to wearing shoes, man, like real shoes. Back to rushing to class. Back to having questions. Lots of questions. Back to vending machine dinners. Back to too much caffeine. Too late at night. But feeling like it was a night well spent. Back to pursuing your dreams and taking control of your future. Come back to go forward. Try C, where futures begin.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students, kindergarten through 12th grade, can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve.
Because I am a future leader of this great nation.
I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family.
And educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams, I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity.
A home.
At Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America.
The ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
Browns on the bye. The coaching staff trying to get that offense fixed. Talked about how his head coach, Kevin Stefanski, has handled the adversity of the first 12 games of the season. Browns 6-6.
I think Kevin, he has all the virtues and characteristics that are important for the leader of our organization. I think it starts with his self-awareness and accountability. It goes to his level of introspection in terms of the team, the job that our group is doing, and it also goes to just his open-mindedness and ability to adjust. I think he's been very transparent with you guys in terms of the areas where he's felt like our team can perform at a higher level. Again, I talk about adversity. I think Kevin's level of accountability is exactly what you want in tough stretches, and I think our guys take their cue from him.
Let's welcome in Tom Withers, reporter for the Associated, covering the Browns as well as Cavs Indians for a long, long time. Tom, what about the job Kevin Stefanski has done? Certainly, I didn't expect him to be 6-6. I don't think anybody expected him to be 6-6. He's the same guy as when they were doing so well last year, though.
Yeah, welcome to some adversity, Kevin Stefanski, right? And it was, it was tough last year. Let's not short sell, what he did last year in terms of getting that team through an unprecedented season with the pandemic. But this is a very different football season, and this team has got some issues, and I think some of them were revealed for the nation to see on Sunday night. They're not scoring points. While the defense has been better the last few weeks, the offense continues to sputter and spin its wheels. So, you've got to give Andrew Berry the benefit of the doubt here. He hired Kevin Stefanski for this reason, right? He saw him as a guy that is going to be able to steer the ship through some choppy waters, and we certainly got him right now.
Yeah, and I found this really interesting. So ESPN.com ranked coaches on fourth down calls, and there was a lot of talk about Kevin Stefanski and going for it on fourth downs earlier in the year. So Cliff Kingsbury is ranked number 1, Matt LaFleur of Green Bay number 2, John Harbaugh of Baltimore third. Kevin Stefanski ranked number 8, and basically the fourth down conversions were not working is what those numbers to the left tell you there. He has since kind of backed off a little bit from that, the fourth down and going for it. But yeah, the offense has struggled. Tom, let me ask you this. Do you think it's scheme related? It almost looks like there's no answers to some things.
Dave, I think that's the $1 million question. Like, does this thing have to be, can this type of football win anymore? I think that's got to be evaluated when we get to the off season here. This tight end heavy formations, this run first kind of mentality. Well, I think it does, give you a chance to win. I'm not sure if it's needed right now, and I'm not sure necessarily that the personnel that they have exactly fits what they want to do. Obviously they've got a great offensive line. They've got the running back stable that they want going forward. The big question mark is the quarterback, obviously. But Dave, I think you bring up a good point. Is this schematically what you want to do going forward in today's NFL? They have not scored points. So I think there's going to have to be a deep dive into the analysis, not only on fourth downs, but on first, second, and third as well, as to whether or not this kind of offensive system works.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see if they can come up with some tweaks. You can't reinvent an entire offense in a week, but you can certainly put in some wrinkles. So we'll see what they come up with. So Denzel Ward, this is, again, Pro Football Focus grade, 87.2 against single coverage, highest in the NFL for all cornerbacks. That's how good Denzel Ward has been in coverage. So, Tom, this grade got me thinking, do you expect Denzel Ward to get extended sooner rather than later? He's one of those guys that's due.
Yeah, it's interesting. They did pick up his fifth-year option for next year, so they do have, the ability of taking some time with this. Now, that said, Dave, he's played extremely well this year. He's managed to stay on the field. He's had some bumps and bruises, but knock on wood, he hasn't had that 4-week vacation like we've seen out of him in the past. His coverage has been sensational. And I think, obviously, I could say some of the same things about Greg Newsome. I don't know what his grade is, but I would give him at least an A- or a B+ at this point for his rookie year, because he's had some big assignments and he's played really well. And those two guys complement each other really well. So, Dave, when you look around this roster and you look at, points of weakness and points of strengths, man, they've got two corners that I think can play with anybody right now.
Yeah, and Tom, we're sitting at 6-6 in the bye, and if you told me that the Browns were going to win the next 5 games, I wouldn't be stunned because the roster has that kind of talent on it. But
yeah,
I would be stunned because they haven't been able to string 3 games together all season, really.
You could almost, Dave, say this about the entire league, couldn't you? You can't figure out who's good on a day-to-day basis, never mind a week-to-week basis. So I'm with you. it wouldn't shock me if they ran the table from here, just because this season has just been so inconsistent and up and down and you name it. So it's going to be interesting. Obviously, you know, they've got the luxury of playing the team that they just played. Now, I don't expect Lamar Jackson to give up 4 interceptions and kind of put the game in the silver platter for the Browns. So it's going to be tough, man. You know, and never mind the fact that they're going to be playing some really good quarterbacks going forward as well, along with 5 teams that are all playoff contenders. So not ideal, not the season I think a lot of us expected. You know, I'm not going to pat myself on the back here, but I did pick the Browns to go 10-7 this year. I thought they would have some adversity. I didn't think the path to 10-7 though would be this. So it's been difficult. There's some adversity, and like Andrew Berry said today, they're going to really find out a lot about the character of the roster that they have built over the next 5 games.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, I thought they were going to be a couple games better than that. I thought they might be able to win 12 or 11. I thought they would get. I thought 11-7 was the basement, and that's going to be a stretch at this point in time. Tom Withers and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. On the other side of the break, we continue talking Browns. Are there any offensive adjustments they can make that will get things rolling? Andrew Berry will also talk about that 3 tight end set and some of the scheme things that the Browns are working on. Sports for CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Welcome back. Back to new friends, new classroom, and learning new things. Back to wearing shoes, man, like real shoes. Back to rushing to class. Back to having questions. Lots of questions. Back to vending machine dinners. Back to too much caffeine, too late at night, but feeling like it was a night well spent. Back to pursuing your dreams and taking control of your future. Come back to go forward. Try C, where futures begin.
Sports for CLE continues. We continue talking Browns. Tom Withers and I, and we had alluded to this a little bit earlier. Browns have used 3 tight ends, so 31 personnel they call it, twice as much as the next closest team. The question is the scheme working? Andrew Berry on that 3 tight end set and possible scheme adjustments from earlier today.
From Kevin's perspective, that has been, you know, one of our better personnel groups over the past 2 years, because, you know, we do have a good tight end room, and guys that can create, you know, mismatches when teams will typically play you in base in that personnel grouping. But you're right, it is a balance of all of the, you know, personnel groupings, you know, at your disposal. And, you know, I think, you know, one of the things that at least I feel like I've seen over the past 2 years is, you know, this coaching staff has done a really nice job with schematic adjustments at the pivotal points in the season, whether it's the bye week, the off season, things of those natures, to be honest and self-reflective in terms of what's worked well and what hasn't worked quite as efficiently. So, you know, this will be a big week in terms of addressing all of those type of questions, and certainly looking forward to what Kevin and his staff, you know, kind of have in mind as we get into December.
So Tom Withers, here's a question for you. Do you think they find a way to get Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb in the backfield together? I know they like having them fresh, but when I see the Ravens overloading the left side of the offensive line with 7 of their 11 defenders, I'm thinking put the other guy on there and pitch him the ball and let him go to work.
Dave, I don't disagree with you. I've really been puzzled why they haven't used those guys in some packages together, not necessarily in the backfield together, but one of them in the slot, one of them split out wide, whatever the case may be. When you got 2 dynamic players like that, and Hunt being the more dynamic of the 2 on the field at the same time, and that's a nightmare for defenses. You gotta pick your poison and hope you pick the right or the wrong one, depending on how you look at it. But, you know, I think the biggest thing, Dave, coming out of this break is, and I'm going to sound like a coach here, but I really do think that execution has been a huge part of this. I mean, I think the Browns just got to do a better job of blocking and tackling and doing the basics better than they've done it. I mean, they've seen these heavy packages, these defensive fronts with 7, 8, and 9 guys, and they haven't adjusted to it. They haven't adapted to it. And And it's as easy as throwing the ball downfield, but you've got to figure out some routes where you're going to get some guys open. We've talked a lot about this 3 tight end package. You're going to probably be down Harrison Bryant for another week or 2 with a high ankle sprain. So they're going to have to draw something up. But I'll be honest, I think what they've done is good enough if they get better execution. I really think the penalties have been a huge problem. I mean, never mind these pre-snap penalties. Think about all these games we've seen, guys, where, they've had a conversion on a 3rd down that's brought back because of a holding penalty. It's been little things like this. And unfortunately, too, Dave, I'm afraid that this bye week is coming so late in the season that there's not a whole lot of time to make a huge adjustment. It's going to really have to come down to guys being more accountable and just doing their jobs better.
When you look at it, coming out of the bye, and the bye was significantly earlier last year, the offense kind of took off. And again, it was Kevin Stefanski getting used to Baker Mayfield. Do you see any of that having some carryover where they can come out and kind of revitalize this? Tom, the 7 points in the 4th quarter total in the last 7 games. That's the stat that kind of slaps you across the face and says that's got to be whole lot better.
Agreed. And I think a lot of that has to point to the quarterback. I mean, he has not made plays when they've needed him to make plays. And there's a gazillion variables at play there, right? Protection, guys running the right routes, injuries, et cetera, et cetera. But at the end of the day, as they like to say, is that it's got to come down to guys making plays. And number 6 has not made enough of them. I still think they have a good relationship, Dave. I still think it is a bit of a work in progress. I still think in many ways, this year, everybody got a little bit ahead of themselves. I think, we've seen in the past, whether it's in the NFL or Major League Baseball or the NBA or NHL, sometimes when a team has success, that next year, it's almost a step back, if not a lateral step. And they've got to learn how to win games, how to finish games, how to get a lead and hold on to it. And that just hasn't happened with this group this year. It didn't help with all the Beckham drama and, obviously the injuries and Baker playing basically beaten up since week 2, to me, has been one of the biggest issues of the year. Now, whether or not he's the guy going forward, that's a different discussion. But the guy that you were going to play with this year has been playing hurt for most of the season, and that hasn't been good for him or Kevin Stefanski or anybody else's state of mind around here.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly, and you could tell pretty immediately that was a pretty significant drawback. Before I let you go, a lot of drops, especially against the Ravens in some critical situations. Baker's not getting a lot of help from his pass catchers.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And, it's been, last week it was a skeletal crew, which is why I thought we were a little surprised that we didn't see Rashard Higgins, a guy that Baker can trust to throw the ball to. So that alarmed me a little bit. Also, I think, throwing the ball to Felton on 3rd down is probably not the wise choice. It's not a guy who's necessarily come through for you in those spots this year. So I think, some of it's on Baker, but I think you're right, Dave. I mean, these guys have got to make plays for him. And listen, Landry's not himself. I think we've all seen that. They don't have the receiver right now to stretch the field when Schwartz is out. And DPJ is as good as he is. And I still think he's going to be a very good number 2 receiver for this team. He's not that guy. So, and unless you have the running game going, it's not going to complement your passing game and vice versa. So you're right. Guys just need to make plays and hold on to the ball for him, because they did have their chances the other night and they just let them slip through their hands, literally.
Tom Withers from the Associated Press. Thanks so much for the time and the insight. Tom, as always, appreciate it, man.
My pleasure. Nice talking to you.
All right, Tom Withers, you can read him. Associated Press has been covering the Browns, Cavs, Indians, which will be Guardians for a long time here in Cleveland. We certainly appreciate his time and insight. That'll do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We will see you back here tomorrow, 4 o'clock. Scheduled guest, John Fanta. We'll talk some Browns football with John Fanta and Sam Amico as we dive into the Cavs playing well again as they are getting more and more healthy. That is tomorrow at 4 o'clock, Sports for CLE. We'll see you then. Have a great night, everybody.